Hi, this is Dr. Bob Morecook, your psychology professor, and the topic today is that of flashbulb memories. Flashbulb memories are memories of important life events. They could be things that happened at the personal level. If you're married, this might be your wedding day. They also could be at the shared level. Many a person knows where they were when the airplanes hit the Twin Towers. Do you know where you were then? If you were 8 or 9 or older at the time, there's a good chance that you do. For my generation, the question was always, where were you when President Kennedy was killed? Folks my age can almost always tell you. So, are these flashbulb memories special? Perhaps, because they do not appear to need something called encoding. Now, you've been reading about encoding in your textbook, and this is a figure that shows up there. It's the 3-stage model of memory: sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. And encoding is the process that we use for moving things from short-term memory to long-term memory. It's when we actively try and learn things, either by going over them again and again, or by comparing them to something that we already know. Those two methods are called rote rehearsal or elaborative rehearsal. The argument is that perhaps flashbulb memories go directly into long-term memory without having to go through this encoding process. Imagine the foolishness of a person who would not be able to remember their own wedding day unless they sat there and went over it again and again and again, so they'd be sure not to forget. People don't typically do that, and they also typically don't forget. So perhaps wedding days are flashbulb memories for people who are married. But let's press on now, because they do appear to be special. So, when flashbulb memories first started being studied, back after President Kennedy was assassinated, 3 things seemed to stand out. First off, these memories tended to be highly detailed. If you're married, probably you have highly detailed memories of your wedding day. Or if you were old enough, you probably have highly detailed memories of where you were when the airplanes hit the Twin Towers. I know where I was. I was between 2 classes that I was teaching back to back, and a student came up and told me about it. So these memories tend to be highly detailed, and people tend to be very confident of these memories. And based on the early research, the belief was also that they were highly accurate. But notice the brackets. But wait. We have another shared disaster in American history, another real tragedy. And this disaster was when the Challenger space shuttle disaster lifted off, and it was not a successful liftoff. It offered another opportunity for flashbulb memory research. 7 astronauts lifted off that day, including a public school teacher, the first civilian who was ever scheduled to go into outer space.
Go with follow-up. A minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance.
It was a terrible tragedy, and many a person knew exactly where they were when this event took place back in 1986. This tragedy for the family, tragedy for NASA and the other astronauts, this tragedy for the country did offer an opportunity for research. One professor went to his students and asked them to write out where they were when the Challenger blew up. They did this very shortly after it happened, within a day or 2. He then set aside these writings, and a couple of years later called the same students together again. And he asked them to write out where they were when the Challenger blew up. And when he compared the 2 writings, he found that oftentimes that they were not identical. In fact, some students argued with him and said that the writings that they had written 2 or 3 years later were the accurate ones and that the others were forgeries and that the professor was trying to trick them out of their real memories as part of a psychological experiment. I have a personal experience that ties into the topic of flashbulb memories. Many years ago, I did television news while I was in the Army. I was assigned to Saigon during the Vietnam War. And during December of 1972, President Nixon turned loose the B-52 bombers again over North Vietnam over a 10-day period. This was the biggest story that I covered during the war, except for one. And my memories definitely were of flashbulb quality. They stood out years later. I was certain of my memories, highly detailed, confidently held. That's right, my memory is that we lost 30 over a 10-day period during December of 1972, and I was confident of my memories. A friend visited me 20 years later, and we had a pleasant argument about the number of B-52 bombers that we lost in Vietnam. And he said that we had lost none. I said, friend, it was my job to report it. I'm certain that I'm right. We lost 30. Well, we could not settle it at that moment. There was no internet at that time. But the next day I went to the public library, found back issues of Time magazine, and the truth was we had lost 15. What the devil had happened? My memories were highly detailed. My memories were confidently held. But I was not particularly accurate, just like the folks who remembered where they were and what they were doing when the Challenger blew up. So, out of, not my experience, but out of the experience with the Challenger and also research done after the airplanes hit the Twin Towers, now the way that flashbulb memories stand is that they are highly detailed and they are confidently held, but notice the double line through highly accurate. Actually, flashbulb memories are no more accurate than any other memory, which means that they've got some bits and pieces of holes in them. I certainly was correct that we had lost a large number of bombers. I would have gone into court, though, and testified as to the number, but I would have been wrong. I would have been truthful, but in error. And so then, think about flashbulb memories in the courts. People see crimes. What then does it mean if an eyewitness to a crime says, "Wow, I will never forget what I saw that day," or "I will never forget who I saw do that bad thing"? Flashbulb memories are no more accurate than any other memory, and there's a reasonable chance that some of you, perhaps all of you, some point in the future, will serve on a jury. Please notice the last point. The prestige or education of the person offering the memory may increase the truthfulness of the memory. You may be inclined to trust them more as to being a truthful person, but that does not guarantee the accuracy of the memory. And that's a frowny face. This has been Dr. Bob Morecook for Houston Community College.